Hi, this is Ray Barry, and welcome to the audiowavecafe podcast. On this episode, my guest is Carrie Reichardt. She's the artist who created the Ska'd For Life mural at Pool Meadow bus station, Coventry. First, I talk about racism in music, and I'll be shining a spotlight on the selector, who together with the specials briefly helped establish the music phenomenon that was two-tone. Let's move on. In October 2021, the Black Lives in Music organisation published a report titled Being Black in the Music Industry, which found evidence of systemic racism in the UK music industry. A survey was carried out for the report with over 1,700 music industry professionals and creators taking part. The results surprised me. In my naivety, I assumed that the music industry in the UK in the 21st century was way above any serious accusations of racism. According to the report, 73% of black music professionals had experienced direct or indirect racism in the music industry. The Performing Rights Society has recently said, and I quote, "The UK music sector has a lot more work to do to tackle the anti-black racism which prevents black music creators and music professionals from fulfilling their potential." End quote. Isn't that just a damning indictment of the UK music industry? It's hard enough for a white artist or band to try and build a sustainable music career, but when other barriers, attitudes and opinions by the music industry establishment are directed at you simply because you are black is appalling, and surely the whole music industry suffers because of it. And because of this overt discrimination, 57% of black music creators have seen less qualified white colleagues promoted ahead of them, and 88% of all black music professionals believe there are barriers to career progression within the industry. Beverly Knight told ITV News in 2020 that her record company digitally altered her skin colour on the cover of her first album, so she would be more acceptable to a non-black audience. Alexandra Burke recently broke down in tears, recalling when once she was told to bleach her skin or she wouldn't sell any records, and that she should look more white than black if she wanted to stay at the top of the charts. She also felt powerless to do anything about it because racism is a taboo subject, and she was taught not to talk about it. Let me get this right. Those record company managers were just reacting to market forces, inasmuch as the British music buying public prefer their music performers to be white. Is that true? I'd like to know. Roger Wilson, who commissioned the report, stated that it should, and I quote, inform the music industry and stakeholders of the range and extent of discrimination and disadvantage prevailing in the industry, and so develop support mechanisms to ensure a fairer and more inclusive music industry in the UK. End quote. If any listeners have experience of racial discrimination in the music industry, then you have a platform right here where it's not a taboo subject, and you can feel free to talk about it. Just get in touch. Today, my guest is Carrie Reichardt. She created the Ska'd For Life mural located at Pool Meadow bus station, Coventry. She's an anti-establishment renegade artist. In her own words, she produces seditious ceramics. Carrie, thanks for joining me on this call.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. On your website, Facebook page and the frontage of your house, there is a quote, "I'm an artist, your rules don't apply." Could you explain that?
The saying comes from a badge from about the 1980s. So it wasn't my phrase, it was on a badge that I liked. And I just always liked it. I liked that whole idea of I suppose using art or creativity to circumnavigate certain rules or to be a free thinker and a free spirit.
That's very good. What does it mean when you say you are a craftivist?
Well, craftivism, the word was coined by an American academic called Betsy Greer, and it basically took the word craft and activism and put it together, and it became a kind of a word and a way of defining yourself, where you were using craft as a form of activism. And I suppose that came into the kind of language around 2003, 2000, around that time, and it was exactly the same time that I was very involved in work that was evolved around death row, writing to people on death row, trying to highlight how awful death row was, and also then writing to Black Panthers, political prisoners in America. And so my work was very involved in raising consciousness, mainly about my friends, people that I wrote to. And so that craftivist title, that word became something that I would refer to and refer to myself as a craftivist. And often people would label me that or say that, you're a craftivist. And so there was a brief time period where it was kind of in vogue. I think there's been a period of shift where craft became cool again. I think if you go back before that, you know, craft was considered, old fuddy-duddy, old ladies did it, what was craft, and then I think there was all that DIY explosion, and you could see that craft was, in terms of the media, was becoming something else. Now when you look at if you go into Waterstones, there'll be a craft section. If you go look at The Guardian, they'll have a craft section. This didn't really exist, I don't think, pre-2000, it just didn't. It was and so there was a whole kind of movement. I think part of that was all part of reusing, recycling, considering that we live on a finite planet. I think all these things came together, and the media loves it, doesn't it? We love a word, we love a group, we love a way of describing something. So craftivism became this thing, and I became kind of like a spokesperson for it because I'm quite, I mosaic my whole house, or I was quite out in front of that kind of ideas. I don't really refer to myself as a craftivist anymore because I essentially get paid to do what I do. It's not a form of activism. People still say that I'm a craftivist, and in a way, I accept that. But I have also, because I've been going so long, I don't like being labelled anything, really. I don't like having to be labelled something. I think once you've been labelled a craftivist or labelled anything, people define you as that, and then often they put you on a pedestal that they want to knock you off of. I've seen that with my own career or my own artistic practice, that once I was labelled a craftivist, you know, I would be open to people having a go at me. I literally put a photo up once of there was a Coca-Cola can in my studio, and what, you call yourself a craftivist and you drink the devil's brew? Call yourself a craftivist and you think this. So I've kind of leaned away from being labelled anything now because I don't like it. But I think that essentially that's what craftivism is. It's the idea that you apply craft and activism.
That's really interesting. Because when you said that you wrote to prisoners and Black Panther members, were you creating art then? A,
Yeah.
a, a specific piece or something?
Yeah, I've always, I have a degree in sculpture. Graduated in 91 from Leeds Polytechnic with a first in sculpture. And really, I didn't really like the art world. I've always sat uncomfortably in it. I've always known that I've used art very therapeutically for myself, and I got into community art. So I was essentially, when I left college, a community artist. I worked with my two, with Karen, who was my best friend from college, and her brother, and we still work together now, 25 years later. But essentially, I became a community artist, and I taught in schools. And at that time in 2000, I picked up a big issue. The big issue
I
for
do.
homeless people.
Yes.
And at the back of it, it had human rights. Could you befriend someone on death row as a humane act? And I thought, yeah, do you know what? I could. And I have to admit, I was fascinated by death row. I grew up reading about the Moors murderers. I was fascinated to understand how anyone could do that, kill somebody else. It wasn't just from me being a really nice person. I was curious about this. And I thought, you know what, I could write to someone. And so I put myself forward, and this organization just teams you up with somebody else. And I was just given a name, Luis Ramirez, and I just sent him a letter and started writing to him. And that kind of literally that changed really fundamentally my whole life, because I wrote to this guy, and it was really funny because I'd just split up with my husband. I had a young child. I wrote to this person. I sent a letter out there, and about 2 weeks later, a letter came back, and it sat on my fireplace. Me thinking, "Oh God, what have I done? I'm written down. Well, I'm writing to a mass murderer. What am I doing? Suddenly, oh God!" And then I got this letter, and I opened it. And it said, "Oh, hi, Carrie. Thanks for writing to me. I see you do mosaics. I have done mosaics. What kind of mosaics are you interested in?" And it was just like, wow, humanity hits you in the face. All those preconceived ideas just disappear. And suddenly I was just writing to this amazing guy called Lewis, who actually won awards for his writing. He was an amazing person. And over the 5 years, he was like my confidant and a really good friend. And during that process, I became kind of like some middle class woman in Chiswick writing to some guy in death row in Texas, who kind of made me understand that capital punishment means those with no capital get punished. I suddenly got found myself in a world where I was seeing that the state was gonna murder my friend, who I absolutely believe who was innocent, who went to his death saying he was innocent. And so I suddenly got involved in some whole thing, which is why I said I was kind of a craftivist, because I went to spend the 2 days with him before they executed him, and it traumatized me. It traumatized me not just that the state had murdered my friend, but I guess it was traumatizing for me to realize how unjust the world was, because 'cause I'd kind of been brought up to believe in these pillars of society, law and order and justice, and unless you have any interaction and you understand how awful these things can be, it's easy just to presume that everything works as it should. And then suddenly I was thrown into a world where, after 5 years of writing to my friend and understanding that he was convicted on the sole evidence of a known drug user who was given $500 to say he heard he did it. That was all the evidence. That was all the evidence. He was accused of paying for this person to be murdered, because he was definitely somewhere else when the crime was committed. And so all of this, I found it traumatizing, as you would, and I promised that I wanted to do something. So that was the point where I'd been mosaicing the front of my house. So I decided I'd do this back wall in memory of my friend Lewis. So I spent literally 8 months working maybe 12 hours every day, it's like 7 days a week in my studio, making this great big memorial for him. I had friends help me install it. And then his mother and his sister and his girlfriend all flew in from Texas, and we had a huge party and we unveiled it on the street. And so that was the real starting point, really, for me, of realizing that I could use my creativity in a real activist way. And that dominated my life for quite probably, that was 2005 when he was executed. And then I started writing. Well, the guy in the cell next to him started writing to me, John Joe Amador, and I was asked by his wife to be present at his execution. I went to Texas again 2 years later, and I was present at his execution. But the most amazing story is that in Texas, legally, you can transport a dead body if you have your own body bag. So I arranged to fly out with Nick Reynolds. Nick Reynolds is from a band called Alabama Free. Alabama Free wrote the Sopranos soundtrack. They're quite a cult band, Alabama Free, but his father's the great train robber, Bruce Reynolds. But anyway, he's also the leading expert in death masks. So he flew out with me to Texas, and within 5 minutes of literally watching my friend be executed, we took his body, took him to a cabin in some woods, and Nick performed and did a death mask on him, which is very unusual, because if you think about it, when someone dies, you usually have to have, it goes through a whole process. But when they execute you, they literally give you a death certificate that says homicide and hand over the body. So he was still warm when we had the body, and we took him to some cabins and we made a death mask of him. In his final phone call when he spoke to us, he said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you came all this way for me. I can't believe, death mask is usually bestowed on kings. Now I know I'm not, I'm somebody. Now I know I'm not trash." And so we did this whole very weird, very like, you can't really explain it, but we did this whole thing where we made a death mask, then we had to put the body back into a truck, deliver it to another morgue, got back to England, and during this time period, I'd got a commission by Walk the Plank, a wonderful arts organisation up in kind of Liverpool, I think, who had doing the first ever art car parade. So they'd given me a budget of about 9 grand, and I was going to mosaic a truck that was going to be all tiki inspired with hula hula ladies handing out messages of love. But during the 3 month period leading up to it, I realised I was going to Texas to see my friend be executed. So I had to amalgamate the two things together. And so we decided we would put the death mask on the top of this truck. And so I went off to Texas. We got the death mask. I think it was 8 days later from the execution, I drove through the streets of Manchester with 45,000 people in attendance with this death mask on the top of the truck.
Ah,
And it was quite insane. And we actually won the best decorated truck. But it was amazing because people would come up and say, "What's that face?" Because it's haunting, right? It's a haunting image, and it would give you the dialogue. You'd be able to open up, and I'd be able to tell this story about my friend Ash, who'd been executed, who again went to his death saying, "God forgive them, for they know not what they do." He went again
good
saying that
grief.
he was innocent, and so that truck then took me all around to all the festivals. I used to go with, the Mutoid Waste and go to the Glastonbury Camp Festival, all of these places, we would take this truck and use it as a vehicle to open up a communication about death row. But years later in 2014, that truck was then in the Victoria and Albert Museum as the star exhibit in the Disobedient Objects exhibition called, how one can outshine authority. So it was there to show that how you could protest in death. And that was the most popular show that, the V&A had since 1945,
Right.
nearly 500,000 people saw it, and then it went to Australia, they flew it out to Australia, and so, that's how I got that kind of was named with all the craft of his stuff because that body of work did end up in the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it did serve its purpose. It has immortalised my friend Ash beyond just being somebody who died in Texas on death row.
That is just a fascinating story. So what attracted you to create the Scarred for Life mural?
As I said, I've done Glastonbury a lot, and I work a lot with Shangri-La. There's a field there with it's Shangri-La art. Some of the people from there had the commission to redecorate and redesign the Pool Meadow bus station, and so they contacted me, and they knew my work. They have a very similar ethos of wanting to use art that's really site specific and brings about civic agency, not just decorating something for the sake of it, but seeing how art can really be useful in multiple ways. And so they actually contacted me and asked me, did I want to pitch for doing some work, which I said yes. And I did actually pitch 2 ideas. Originally, I really wanted to do, the bus station, the entrance, that is just classic. I really wanted to do that, and originally I pitched to have two-tone on one and Lady Godiva naked riding on a Triumph bike.
I like it.
Yeah, it would have been great. At the same time, I was simultaneously having to do a job in Boston that had been delayed by 2 years because of COVID, so it was all quite fraught, but basically I was approached and asked because I am a rude girl, my son is called Rudy, where he used to cry every time we played "A Message to You, Rudy," he'd go, "Ah, hate it, hate it, hate it." Now he loves it, but yeah, I mean, essentially, that was my tribe, that was my tribe,
Oh,
and so
right.
because I had such a huge love of two-tone and
Ah,
ska, and I suppose it had been my own political awakening had come from that, because it had been so instrumental to me and so wonderful for me to be part of that. I obviously thought that's what you want to celebrate. If you're dealing with Coventry, you're dealing with the culture. How can you not? How can you not celebrate it? Because it's one of the most important things to come out of Coventry.
that's very true. It's not just a tribute to Two Tone and the Specials.
No, 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 because that's one of the other things. I didn't want it to be because the thing is nothing comes out of nothing. I very much wanted it to be a celebration of everything that came before that, of music, of multiculturalism, to understand that, a band doesn't just come out of nowhere. It comes out of an environment that is, what becomes before that. And, so it's really a celebration of culture, of music, of all the wonderful things that I think have been, on a global level, ever significant.
Right. I believe you enlisted the help of local children with it. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, well, the thing is that was always the hope. With most of my work, because I come from a background of community art, I come from a background of knowing that art has saved my life and how important it is. I strongly believe in public art should be where possible, should be made by the people. That is what true public art and true, is at its best, includes the people who live there in the making, not just the design or anything else. Like I said, we were in a pandemic. It was very difficult. I couldn't do anything for half of it. You're not even allowed out your house. But there was a window of
Yeah.
opportunity that meant that just before we were installing it. We just came out of a lockdown, and me and my friend Sean, we went up to Coventry, and it was great. We worked in two schools, two primary schools, Frederick Bird School,
Frederick Bird, yeah.
and I can't remember, is it St Mary's? I can't remember the other one, was a Catholic school, but we went there for the day, and it was great. We made 100 stars with the kids and the teachers, and it was great. One of them in the Frederick Bird School, they let us play really loud um, ska music all day, and the teacher, who was my age, was like loving it. And it was came as a shock to me is that the young kids didn't know what ska was. I
No.
found it really shocking that you could come from Coventry and not know it,
Yeah.
because it's so important, not just as a form of music, but it had when you think about Special AKA, and you think about Free Nelson Mandela, and you think about Jerry Dammers being one of the only people to be honoured by South Africa, you think about the repercussions that had. I found it shocking that you don't walk around and there aren't blue plaques everywhere, because apparently Terry Hall, I think it was Terry Hall, had gone to the Frederick Bird School. You see, if I was in charge of that school, I'd have a huge blue plaque up that told you that. I would be celebrating it at every place.
There is a specials walk, and I think there are a few blue plaques.
No, no, because one of the other things in my work as a public artist, I always try to go to a place, to try and investigate it, to try and make contacts with people. And when I couldn't do that because of COVID, I've realized you can do it very successfully online. You don't really need to go to a place. But, I try to do due
Yeah.
diligence. I try to really try and go there and find out who knows what, And basically, I think it was Ruth, the woman who did all the books about the Dirty Stop Out books. I'm not sure if she told me about Pete,
Pete Chambers.
but I managed to make contact with him, and he allowed me to come to the museum. Yeah, even though it wasn't officially open, he let me come round there. He talked to me. I made sure I spoke to him. I tried to go onto forums. I tried to go into Facebook groups. I tried to go and make sure that I'm finding the information
Right.
about the people that aren't already known, who aren't already famous, if you see what I mean. Because I'm really interested in the grassroots side of things, the counterculture. It's that one person who sets up a fanzine. That those things are the significant things that make other things happen. And so, yeah, I kind of did as much research as I could, and then try to put that visually into the work.
I'm going to give a personal opinion here. I wish actually the mural had been sited on a wall in the city centre itself. For me, it's a bit out the way.
Yeah, it would have been great. It would be great. But the fact is that the bus station is a place where everybody comes and goes. And so it's there. And at least it should be celebrated. It should be celebrated a lot.
Carrie, what plans do you have for the rest of the year?
At the moment, I'm working on a piece for a town called Omsker. It's kind of near Wigan. It's like a little bit above Liverpool. And so I'm working on a small public art piece there, but I'm actually mosaicing a giant Viking chasing gingerbread down the street. And that's because Omsker gets its name from the Viking Om, and it's one of its most famous things is the gingerbread ladies. Essentially, I'm working on this one for Omsker, And then I'm going to go live in a ceramic factory called the Duchess China Factory in Stoke-on-Trent. It's Britain's oldest bone china factory that's been recently taken over by two people that run also the printing factories for ceramics printing. Lovely, lovely guys who used to work in the factories, who since now own the factory, who's trying to keep British manufacture going, which is something I believe passionately in. So they've invited me to literally come and live in the factory. Well, in fact, I begged him. So I'm going to go there and spend a few months there so I can really have a really good understanding of how all of the processes are. And then hopefully we're going to mosaic the outside of the factory with something that celebrates how important ceramics are in Stoke-on-Trent.
Before we finish up, I went onto your website shop to check out if I could buy something, hopefully cheap. Your prices range from about £60 to 6,000, and almost everything is sold. You must be that rarity, a successful artist.
Oh, no, I wouldn't believe the hype. Yeah, I mean, I don't actually sell that much. I mean, I have sold and I do sell. It's not where I make my money. I haven't made my money in selling for really. I make my money in public art and community art. I'm much happier doing public art and community art. It's for me, that's like way more important because I suppose I really appreciate the power of art in the same way that music part of our culture. I believe that about public art, and so for me, what I do is legacy work. Long after I've gone, everyone can go to that bus station and see that. That's a celebration for everyone who walks there. And so as much as it's nice to make a piece of art and, sell it, that's in one person's house, whereas something you put on the streets is there for everyone to enjoy.
Absolutely. Carrie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest. I wish you continued success in all your endeavours.
Oh, thank you. And I tell you, if you drop me your address, I'll send you a tile anyway, so you can.
Oh, I will do. Thank you very much. The Selector, a ska band formed in Coventry in 1979, came about by a set of circumstances. Noel Davis had written a tune called The Selector. It was recorded at Roger Lomas's 4-track studio with Noel on guitar, John Bradbury drums and Barry Jones trombone. I have no other info on any other collaborating musicians. The result was a moody, ska-type atmospheric instrumental, starting with a sci-fi-like intro. It was certainly different. Roger Lomas then approached several record companies with it, but none were interested. Jerry Dammers was experiencing the same apathy from record companies to the special song Gangsters, so Jerry decided he needed to start up his own record label and get the song on general release, and the Selector instrumental was chosen to be the B-side. So the two-tone label was born, and the rest is history. With Gangsters' runaway success, Noel Davis decided he should capitalise on that success by forming a band, the Selector. He brought in Charlie Anderson on bass, Compton Amanor guitar, Desmond Brown organ, Charlie H. Bembridge drums, and Pauline Black vocals. Roger Lomas suggested that On My Radio would make a great debut single, and so it proved. The Selector's version of ska with punk overtones catapulted the song to number 8 in the charts. The Selector had arrived. Chrysalis Records quickly rushed the band back to the studio to record Too Much Pressure, their first album produced by Errol Ross, and recorded at Horizon Studios, Coventry. The album subsequently earned a gold record. From the outset, tension was ever present in the band. The group were unhappy with Errol Ross's production. Pauline Black thought Roger Lomas would have produced a better album. Also, a UK tour with the Specials was marred by violence, and an American tour was less than successful. Even the band's relationship with the Two-Tone label was badly strained, with the band soon parting ways with Two-Tone and signing exclusively with Chrysalis Records. But time was running out for the Selector, and the band split up in 1981, with the ex-members going their own way with new projects. In 2011, Pauline Black and Gaps Hendrickson reformed the Selector, bringing out several albums including Subculture and Daylight, released in 2017. For me, the album was predictable but well produced, with the band sounding confident and obviously enjoying themselves. Over the years, they have toured across Europe and America, but this year, Pauline Black, Gaps Hendrickson and the band are playing a number of dates across the UK, ending on the 19th of November at the HMV Empire in Coventry, the city where it all began, 43 years ago. The song coming up was sent in by Tim Constable of late 70s to early 80s Coventry band Paris, recorded at Woodshed 2000 recording studio, Stretton-on-Dunsmore, with Fran Pettifer bass guitar, Pat Miller vocals, Steve Roberts guitar, Danny Livesey drums, Tim Constable keyboards and backing vocals, and mastered by Grammy Award winner Roger Lomas. Written by Tim, Paris Fashions.
Except feed it on money. And now I just see it as an awful waste. You can't have bread without honey. When you found it once, you just can't lose the taste of personal attention. There's nothing you could do with real leather boots that I could do with Doc Martens. It's no good being honey blonde when you brown roots showing where you got a part in. As you stand selecting the expensive suits with particular attention to those Paris fashion shows. Those Paris fashion shows. The Paris fashion. Oh, the Paris fashion. Oh, the Paris fashion shows. From the fashion house designers, it's the only way you know to get the nods and winks and anonymous admirers. You don't realize that everyone around you thinks you're trying to grab attention to those Paris fashion shows. Those Paris fashion shows. The Paris fashion. Except feed it on money. And no, I just see it as an awful waste. You can't have bread without honey. When you found it once, you just can't lose the taste of personal attention to those Paris fashion shows. Those Paris fashion shows. The Paris fashion.
That was Paris Fashions by Paris, taken off their album Unfinished Business, and I'll be playing more of their songs in future episodes. Yeah, great band. I have an update on my previous topic, NFTs, what are they, in my last podcast with John Hewitt. The number of active wallets fell in early May by 88%. Many NFT owners are alarmed to discover that their investments have drastically decreased. Yet experts are saying the market isn't crashing, it's merely stabilising. What? See, I just don't get this stuff. But I understand this. A certain Senator Estavi paid $2.9 million for an NFT of then Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey's first tweet. Estavi hoped to resell it for $48 million. The top bid was just under 7,000. Oh my. I feel sorry for Mr. Ostavi. No, I don't. My guest on Podcast 7, published on Sunday the 12th of June, will be Joe Reynolds. He's a sax player, songwriter and poet. You can also catch him on a YouTube video playing sax on 3 Minute Hero by The Selector. My topic will be who buys vinyl records, and I shine a spotlight on Bird Sound Studios, a 70s recording studio in Snitterfield. I think that's it. Yep, I'm done. Till next time.